We are live tonight. Congratulations to all the teachers who made it through their last school year. And we are here enjoying our summer. Happy Canada Day and happy 4th of July to all of my viewers. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you are going to thoroughly enjoy your summer. This summer, I'm still going to be going live every Monday night. And we're going to be talking about the planning that you should be not necessarily thinking about right now, but maybe something that you need to be thinking about in the future. But we're going to go live and talk about that all throughout the month of July and August, getting ourselves ready to go back to school. Now, I do have to say that one of the things that I definitely do now so that I don't have to do it later is one of the first things I tackle is dealing with my timetable. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, is how to deal with your timetable and how you schedule things and where you put things into that template that you're given from your principal, and what is the logic that goes in behind where you schedule things. And I mean, does it even matter? I totally think it does matter where you put things, especially if you're teaching a split. Having a thought out timetable helps you manage routine, transitions. It helps you to establish classroom management procedures that make your life in the long run a little bit easier. When you're thinking through all those routines and rules that you're going to have to implement in your classroom, which you're going to put off maybe until closer to the beginning of the school year, when you think about that, it kind of starts out with your timetable. And it's a really easy thing to kind of get through and tackle really quickly so that you can get on and think about the rest of your summer. So tonight I am going to walk through with you how I take that blank timetable that I was given by my principal and how and why I plug in certain subjects into certain places. If you have any questions while I'm going along, or if you've got some confusing parts on your timetable, let me know and maybe we can problem solve those together. So if you've got some ideas as to where things go, I'm ready to tackle those. So we'll start out with my time commitments. Now, the things that I am required to teach this year are going to be language, math, science, social studies, art, visual arts, drama, and my own library. I am not teaching dance, phys ed, French language, because I don't speak French. And I'm also not going to be covering music. That is covered by a prep teacher. So those are the things that have already been pre-scheduled. All of my prep subjects have been pre-scheduled for my students into my timetable. And then I need to go about timetabling around that. And every year, because your timetable looks different every year, what you're able to do with your allotted time is a little bit different. Now, I do go along and follow these guidelines when I'm scheduling my timeline. So for language arts, I do have 100 minutes of uninterrupted language instruction. Now, my school functions on a balanced day. So that means that we follow 100 minutes of instruction, a 40-minute lunch, followed by another 100 minutes of instruction, a 40-minute lunch and recess, and then a third block of 100 minutes of instruction. So for me, I'm looking at 100 minutes of instruction for language arts every day, and that covers reading, writing, oral communication, and media. I'm also mandated to cover 300 minutes a week of math, and that works out to roughly 60 minutes in a day. Now that can be split up. It doesn't have to be uninterrupted. So because our periods are 50-minute periods, I will often do a 50-minute math period and then have math integrated into other areas such as science and social studies or art, or maybe we'll just do a quick review of number sense and numeration facts as kind of part of a DPA activity. We'll do that for 10 minutes a day. At the end of the week, I do have 300 minutes. I'll be honest, sometimes I don't quite hit the 60 every day, but I definitely do by the end of the week. I have between 150 and 200 minutes of science and social studies, so that roughly works out to 3 to 4 periods a week of that. And again, I'm teaching a split, so I cover both grades during that 150 to 200 minutes a week. Arts is at 150 to 200 minutes a week. Generally, that is split up between 2 periods for visual arts. Drama gets integrated, and music is a prep coverage for me. Physical education, my students get 3 periods a week, so 150 minutes of physical education in the gymnasium. And I'm required to do 40 minutes a week of DPA on the non-phys ed days. So I need to find time in my schedule to do that as well. And that sometimes is a bit of a play as to when that happens, because I don't like to, we'll talk about what I don't like to do DPA in. French is at 200 minutes a week and library is at 50. Now, if you are good at math in your head, you have figured out that that is over the 1,500 minutes of instructional time my students get. And I'm talking about 2 separate grades at the same time, because again, for year number 7, I have a 4-5 split once again. So I have both grades and I need to cover all of that time. So integration is the name of the game, and time on task is really important. So I try to make sure that I leverage that instructional time and I plan those key subjects at key times so that I can avoid those interruptions that normally happen during the day. It's an easy transition into that subject area, and all of those things are considerations. So I'm going to start with my language arts. So if I share with you what my schedule looks like here we go. Okay, so this is my desktop screen. So you'll see that my principal has already given me some time periods in the day that I can work with. So I am looking for 100 minutes of uninterrupted language. So you will see that most of the time here, I've already plugged in some of these, but if you see most of the time here, when I have the first 2 periods of my day, I generally have enough time for language. Now, I do like to prioritize consistency. So if I'm looking at day 1, the only time I have 100 minutes of uninterrupted language time is going to be during that day 1 period. So language will have to go here. And because consistently I've got that first block available, I will be putting language at the beginning of my day. Ideally, I do like to put math at the beginning of my day. Unfortunately, my priority for having 100 minutes of uninterrupted language predicts that I'm going to have my language the first 2 periods. I like having math first. If that was possible, where I would have a lot of my prep in the first 2 periods, then I would have been putting math very first period, because that is where the students are most awake and they are most focused. So being able to put math in the first half of the day is always my priority. And wanting to look at that transition so they come in, I can quickly have them do some bell work review if it's math, and I can have them in there. Unfortunately, this year, I don't have that ability to be able to do math at the beginning. But if I'm looking at periods 3 and periods 4, I at least have those days open, so I can be doing that here. Now, one of the things is I like to have math directly after a hard transition time where they're not in my classroom previously. So if I am phys ed and library here, if I am putting math in these places, we are not in the classroom. So when we transition back into the classroom, then we can start math, and because it's easier for me to start a routine with math when they have to enter into the classroom, as opposed to transitioning from one subject into math. I like the hard transitions where they enter the classroom and math starts that way. So for me, my 100 minutes of language will mostly be within the first block, because I do need to just plug that in wherever I have the 100 minutes available. So I'm kind of stuck that way. So day 1, 2, 4, and 5, I will have language periods 1 and 2. And then day 3, I could either do it last period or this period, but for consistency's sake, I will just put it in the next available time. As well, I'm going to be plugging in my math here in period 4 on day 1, and again here day 2. It's after a hard transition. or it's right after nutrition break, again, so that they can enter into my classroom. So really those are the first two things that I figure out, is where is my language going to go and where is my math going to go? And those two play together because I want math to come in the first half of the day as possible. I try to avoid math at the end of the day after their second nutrition break, those period 5 and period 6. If I avoid math at those times, students just aren't concentrating. They don't have the focus that's required often for math in the afternoon. So if I can avoid doing something as taxing as math with students in the afternoon, I will. So I try to put those as much as possible in the first 4 periods, if not the first 3 periods of the day. Now, the other thing I have is my DPA. Now, this seems like it's only 40 minutes. Why is it so important to figure out when you're going to do DPA? For me, DPA is very important for my students. It helps to get them moving. But if I have the mandated 20 minutes, what I can't do is take that 20 minutes out of my instructional time for language, math, and especially for science and social studies. Because I have a split grade, I am teaching 2 separate grades, science and social studies. So I need as much time on task with my class as possible. So if it's a 50-minute period and I use 20 minutes of that period for DPA, then I only have 30 minutes of instructional time to cover 2 grades. It's just simply not enough time. So I need to find time in my schedule. When I look at when I have phys ed on my schedule, I don't have phys ed on day 2 and I don't have phys ed on day 5. So that is when I really need to figure out when I'm going to do DPA. Well, it just so happens that I have a library period on day 2. My students I'm teaching my own library this year, so I don't necessarily need to have media, which is typically matched in with library coverage. But because I'm teaching my own library this year, I can choose what else I want to pair up with the book exchange and time in the library. So we will be doing our DPA during that time because it's not taking away from reportable subject time. As well, on day 5, I actually have a little bit of an extra flex period that I can throw in that last period 6. So that's where I will have DPAs at the end of the day, period 5. We'll also have our time to fill out agendas and do community circles and all of that administrative flex time back there. Or if I have any extra time that I've missed a period I need to catch up, my catch-up period will definitely be that day 5, period 6, which is right down here. So those are the 3 most important ones that I have to schedule first off. Language, because it's 100 minutes of uninterrupted and it's hard to find that in my schedule. Math, I look for right after transition periods. And then DPA gets plugged into those days I don't have phys ed, and I try to find times where I'm not teaching my core subjects of language, math, science, or social studies, because with a split, you just don't have time. So I'll show you what this looks like when I've plugged everything in. So this is how I have scheduled my time. And it's color-coded because, well, why not? To make it look pretty. But you will notice that I have scheduled in so all of my French is in the last block of the day. And I've had to simply schedule my science and social studies periods wherever they fit. Because the scheduling of language and math is paramount, I do not necessarily get a choice of when science is thrown in there. Now, you will notice that I do have a science that buds up against on day 5, buds up with math, and that will often be where I'm pulling in that extra math time that I may have missed throughout the week. But it's not ideal to have science last period, but sometimes it just has to happen that way. And because I'm using a lot of inquiry and students are active and they're hands-on, then it actually does work out pretty well that I have science those last 2 periods. And those are a great time to do your experiments or your hands-on activities where your kids are active and moving and getting really immersed and involved. Those are the great times to do those activities when you've got science scheduled at the very end of the day. Finally, wherever there's extra time, I will throw in music, art, and drama. And that is simply just the last thing I schedule. Ideally, I love it when I can have art at the end of the day. And sometimes I will use another time. So you'll notice I only have art scheduled once. It's nice if you can do art for 100 minutes, but sometimes that just doesn't work out. And with the increased time in math, unfortunately, that's been taken during that time, but art will get integrated with language and other subjects. And also it can be used on that day 6 day where it's extra DPA. We can throw in some art catch-up time there. Now, this year, I didn't have the opportunity to have a huge block of art time. So what I ended up doing was having art at the end of the day one day, and then I had it the very first period the following day. And I was surprised at how well that actually worked. Having art at the end of the day and then following it up by starting the next day with art, it ended up being that my first period was instructional. So the one at the end of the day was often art instruction. And then they came into the class and got started right away. So that was really, really helpful. So I have my schedule here as to what it's going to look like. Now, when I have French, you'll notice that it looks like I have a lot of prep. I don't have all of that amount of prep. I do have other coverage where I'm teaching art to other classrooms this year. That seems to be my prep coverage time. So that is when I am going to be teaching when my class has French for some of the time. So if you have any questions about my schedule or about what you're wondering about how I've plugged that in, feel free to drop a comment in the show here and let me know what you think about that schedule and how that would work with your schedule. And if you really want, you can even add a picture of what your schedule looks like and get some feedback on how you are scheduling different things in your classroom. So this is what's going to work for me, and we're going to try it out and we're going to see. And sometimes things are going to change because that's just the nature of the beast, is that you try it out and sometimes it changes, and that's okay. So I hope that this was helpful for you tonight to see how and my thought process behind why I schedule certain subjects where, and this does help establish better routine and structure in my classroom because I have some consistency in my schedule in terms of when subjects are placed and how I think through that so that I'm planning out what those transitions are going to look like, what classroom management might look like, and what the routines and procedures might be for each of these subjects. So I hope that was helpful to you, and let me know if you need any more support on how you schedule and timetable your own classroom for September. And that is it for tonight's episode. If you want more information, you can read the blog post that goes along with this video over at www.madlylearning.com. And if you want the links to the podcast or YouTube show that is the replay version of tonight's live episode, you can find all of that information on the show page at www.teachingwithinquiry.com. And we will get together next week, Mondays at 9 o'clock, where we will talk a little bit more about other procedures that we can put into place now to make our life in September a heck of a lot easier. Thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.